Welcome to our conversations with innovation heroes of the Mach49 journey. And today we're really delighted to present Jake Olsen, and then of course, Dave Blakely, who's one of the partners at Mach49. I'm Huggy Rao. I'm a faculty partner at Mach49, and it's my privilege to have both Jake and Dave with us today. So, Jake, you have like an extraordinary arc. I mean, you studied in the Bay Area, then went to the East Coast, and then built a company and a business in Taiwan, and then China, and then to Stanley Black and Decker, and now to Dado, which is an insurgent startup. I mean, it's like amazing. I couldn't describe you. So if you were going to introduce yourself to a coach, how would you describe yourself and the arc of your life?
I don't know if you've ever done the Enneagram. Have you heard about the Enneagram? It's like a personality. So we've done that at our company to just help work with each other and understand our
Maybe you might want to explain to viewers what your experience was with that.
Sure. So, there's various personality tests. I think some people might have done like a Myers-Briggs or a DISC assessment. And I've always found these to be very useful in collaborating and working with teams because, the first time you go through one of these, you're in a group of people that you're working with and you realize, everybody answers the same set of questions. And when you get the questions to you, they're like, of course, this is the answer. Of course, this is what I would do if I found somebody's wallet or if I was in a stressful situation. There's no question the way in your mind you would answer these simple questions. And then you get into the room and you share, how the different personality types, and you realize that, wow, there's really quite a bit of difference between people and personalities and how they think. And it's kind of an enlightening moment for the first time you've done that, because you realize not everybody's like you. And then you also realize that how you interact and optimize your conversations and get people motivated is different based on their personality. But so Enneagram is a personality test. I think it's a more popular one. I think it's actually used quite a bit in the Silicon Valley area and in startups. We found it to be very helpful in our company. So I'm a type 7, which is the enthusiast. And I think that like perfectly describes me. So the positive parts of a type 7 is, positive energy, very curious, insatiably curious, kind of the entertainer in senses. Like I want to try to like bring people together and excited. Also take risk. So kind of like always looking for the next thing, which kind of explains why I've moved all over the place and done a bunch of different things. I'm always kind of willing to take the risk and do the next thing. The negative parts are no patience, low attention to detail. So I've always got to surround myself with people who do the detail side because I know I don't do it well. But I think that I would explain myself exactly. If somebody knows the type 7, I would say I'm a type 7 because I'm like the model type 7 Enneagram. But I'm a very enthusiast, outgoing, curious person with low patience, low attention to detail, and sometimes, just a general urgency to do the next thing. I'll be the person that's on day 2 of a 5-day vacation thinking about, what's the next vacation or what's after this. I don't do well just turning off and relaxing. I'm always looking at the next thing. So for me, it was just a natural course to move to New York, move to Shanghai, move to the Bay Area. I just enjoy kind of what's the next thing. So
yeah. So Dave, let me pull you in. You worked with Jake since the inception of his Mach49 journey along with his team. What was your first sense impression when you first met Jake?
Well, consistent with Jake's typing himself as an Enneagram type 7, which is the adventurer and the lover of variety. One of the first things I noticed about Jake it was his ability to leap huge cultural gaps with a single bound. I mean, here's a guy who's equally comfortable talking to very hard-nosed construction workers, finicky software developers, and confrontational corporate managers, all on Monday morning. right?
Amazing.
And so tying it back to what Jake said a little earlier, I'm happy to hear, Jake, that you're using the Enneagram. I think it is the most powerful personality typing tool. While we should never allow ourselves to be limited by any sort of personality taxonomy, that sort of energizing quality of an Enneagram 7, energizing those around you, sincere excitement that is infectious to those around you, and more than anything, the optimistic and forward-thinking quality of Enneagram 7s, that's been present with you since the day we met.
Yeah, you have to have a bit of a little bit of a optimism, I think, to start a company and kind of bring, especially to really come up with new ideas. You've got a good idea when everybody around you says that's a terrible idea.
So,
And you've got to have the perseverance to get through that, which is not easy.
right. So, Jake, let me ask you a follow-up. So, what are the well springs of this curiosity, this enthusiasm, this ability, as Dave points out, to effortlessly move across cultural zones? How did all of this sort of begin? Something you were born with? Something in your early life experience?
That's a good question. I think there is some kind of innate personality that you're born with, and I could see that with my kids. Both born in the same family, really unique personalities and wonderful personalities, but unique. So I think there is some innate something you're born with, but I do think that becomes kind of fostered and probably nurtured in a way that it maybe you get pushed one way or the other. So I was a son of educators. So my father was a shop teacher at a high school, and my mother was a school nurse for a long time. So we had lots of family, no money, but lots of family time together, summers off and that type of thing. And we did just a ton of travel and a lot of just exploring, building things hands-on, just constantly, constantly kind of chasing ideas and very open to experiences versus material stuff, which was kind of how I grew up. And so I, as a young kid, I remember interacting with all sorts of people, and I've always enjoyed that. Talking to I remember, I think it was 4th grade or 5th grade, somewhere in there, one of my teachers was like, Jake, I feel really comfortable talking to you, like, because I just talked to my teacher like a respectable person, but it wasn't like this strange, you're the teacher, I'm the student. It was just somebody I could have an interesting conversation with. And I don't know, it never seemed odd to me to kind of talk to an executive or to a construction worker, to your point,
Right.
Dave. And I'll tell you, in the industry we're in, and Dave and I spent a lot of time talking in the same morning, the hard-nosed, come walk in and put your dirty boots on the desk and say, what the hell do you guys want? And then the corporate exec within 30 minutes of each other. And so you have to be able to kind of jump back and forth.
So this is like Mars and Venus.
Yeah, but if you're curious, and if you're like, for me, that makes me excited. I love having those kind of different perspectives. I enjoy that.
Yeah. So let me sort of very quickly spend a little bit of time on your founder experience. So when you set up the businesses in Taiwan and China, were you fluent in Mandarin? Was that a language you knew before you went there?
I thought I was fluent. Then I got there and I realized I had a lot to learn. So I was studying Mandarin prior to moving over there. I was actually doing quite a bit of work in China. I was working for a company that was basically doing most of their R&D and sourcing in China.
So can you pick out maybe a defining moment of your founder experience building businesses in Taiwan and China? What's something that stands out for you that's emblematic of the experience?
Certainly the cultural difference, and so I was traveling back and forth to Asia quite a bit prior to actually moving there. And there's a great quote that's always stuck with me, and I think it the longer I was there, the more it made sense. So it's something along the lines of, if an American goes to China for a weekend, they can come back and write a book about China. If an American goes to China for a week, they can come back and write an essay. If they're there for a month, they can probably write a paragraph. And if they're there for more than a year, they know better than to say anything about China, because they really don't understand how different of a culture and a different of a society is. And that became very true to me as I think kind of leading into some of the Mach49 experience. I think learning to listen and to really understand that whatever you think, whatever your preconceived notions are, whatever you have as norms, you have to be willing to kind of let those go and really learn and listen and be willing to relearn. And that was a big slap in the face for me when I first got. Yeah, I thought I knew everything when I got there, and by the time I left, like 5 years later, it was like, whew, I couldn't. I know better than to write a sentence about China at this point.
Yeah. That's a beautiful way to describe it. So, how would you describe a founder? What's the difference between a founder and a manager?
Yeah, I've kind of been in both sides.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the major difference for a founder is you have to devote. I mean, you have to have this belief of where you're going, and it's on you. Like, you need to have this vision and this belief, and you have to. It may not be a straight path, but you have to have a sense of where you're going, and that's your responsibility. And as a manager, a lot of the stuff underneath that, how do I motivate people? How do I get teams to work? Those are same whether you're a founder or a manager. And if you're a good manager, a lot of the same stuff applies. But what the big difference is, when you're a manager, you're in a framework where somebody else has set that forward vision and belief, and you need to kind of help execute on it. When you're a founder, that's your vision, and you need to figure out how do you get that throughout the organization? How do you get people inspired and aligned? And that is not like a one and done job. That is a daily part of the responsibility. How do I continuously drive this vision? And that, for folks who have been in the founder seat, I mean, that is a huge part of the job that comes out in all different ways, whether it's defining your values, the people you hire, the product decisions you make, the way you interact. That's really, for me, a huge difference between founding and managing.
So Dave, what do you think about founders and managers? Are there similarities and differences? And if so, what might those be?
I think the major difference, just building on what we heard a minute ago from Jake about between founders and managers, is I see founders like Jake as keepers of the vision. And a good founder is almost hormonally, fundamentally driven to propel his or her vision forward, and just as important, convince everyone else around them, right, investors, coworkers, partners, of the legitimacy and excitement and energy behind that vision, okay? And I'm gonna bet you that if Jake thinks about his day, even if it's a little indirect, every single thing he does, whether it's, sitting down with a software partner to help go through a new revision, or looking at a new space that he might expand into at WeWork. Every single thing that he does is about propelling that vision forward. Now, with a manager, it's a little different. A manager is about taking an assignment, and it could be a very high level and ambiguous assignment, and breaking it down into a set of actionable chunks. Both absolutely essential roles in the business of entrepreneurship.
Wonderful. So you finished China, you joined Stanley Black & Decker. Now, what was that for a founder to go back to a large company? Walk me through that. Was there a culture clash, or was this a seamless transition?
No, not seamless. As you can probably guess that in the way you're reacting, but that was tough. So I started a company there in Shanghai and one in Taiwan, and those were acquired by Stanley Black & Decker. And, my immediate reaction was I need to go start another company. And I was actually pretty far down the line of doing that when I ended up on the phone with the president of DeWalt at the time, which is one of the Stanley Black & Decker brands. And he said, Jake, you know, you need to give this a try. You need to see what it's like to have the resources of a large company, and what this, you know, you need to at least give this a shot. Come back to the US. I was still in China at the time trying to make this decision. Come back to the US and give this a shot. And, you know, it was great. And I am very thankful that I made that decision, because I think it opened my eyes to kind of both sides, small company, startup, you know, mentality, as well as what large corporations can, you know, what it means to have the resources of a large corporation, and the brand. And there's, I mean, I had great experiences on both sides. I think it helped me really answer the question personally to myself of what do I want to do in my life. And after almost 5 years at Stanley Black & Decker, it became clear that I wanted to start another company, and I wanted to get back to the entrepreneurial side. But I was able to do that much more informed, much more appreciative of what corporate America looks like, and how they operate, and how they can be successful in some of the same spaces, but also why there's a need for kind of entrepreneurial activities and startups and people in the same space. There's a need for both. There really is. And I wouldn't have appreciated that. I kind of had this, like, you know, the stereotype of corporate America being this, you know, stodgy place I didn't want to be part of prior, but I had a really good experience at Stanley Black & Decker. And so I left on very good terms. And as you know, through the Mach49 path. And it's been I think having both of those now in my background, it's been a great, it's just really helped me not only personally understand how to, you know, optimize what I want to do, but I think building another business now, starting another company with that, I've just been able to leverage some of the things that big companies do great. And that's helped me start this new company. That's
wonderful.
Yeah.
Because this kind of brings me to this interesting question of your journey of creating, if you will, a startup culture in Stanley Black & Decker, given your work with Dave and the Mach49 team. And so one way to think about your experience might be that in large companies, typically when they say, hey, we're a large company with a lot of resources, but we want to create the soul of a startup in the large company, that journey can be seen as a journey between two rooms. One is a room that loosely I refer to as a room called doubt. And there may be associated emotions like anxiety and so forth, but there's another room called confidence. And part of the challenge is to actually figure out what the passageway is between both those rooms. Of course, we need a little doubt. Of course, we need a little confidence. So if you think of Mach49, the process as a passageway, and working with Dave and his colleagues as a passageway, walk me through that experience. What was it like going from, did you start in a room called doubt, you and your colleagues at Stanley Black & Decker, and describe the Mach49 process as the passageway to a room called confidence?
Yeah, Dave can add on a little bit here too, but I think in some ways, the ways a large corporation manages their risk and ensures they're on a steady path of growth is to be able to say no really well, and to be able to really beat things up and prove that things are bad ideas, which is actually, if you've got a disciplined kind of growth engine, in the case of Stanley Black & Decker, creating new power tools and products like that, very steady growth, you learn how to optimize that and say no to this crazy stuff. And so basically, if you're a person that has crazy ideas like I was, it just becomes, you begin to doubt even your ability to get that stuff done, just because you're in the corporation that's not optimized for, the out of the left field ideas. So I think the big unlock that gave both of us confidence, not only me, but also the corporate supporters of this whole Mach49 process, was, and I give Stanley Black & Decker credit because they've always valued the voice of the user. And they've always said that, we're a user first company. What what I don't think they realize is how powerful it can be to really go get the voice of the user, and not kind of superficial, but to really go understand the voice of the user and the problems that that person's experiencing. Not in a, what type of tool or does this particular widget solve your problem, but in a truly, when you wake up in the morning, what's the problem in your life? Maybe you hone in a little bit on your job, but what, you know, keeps you as a, in my case, a foreman working for a trade contractor, or a project manager or a scheduler, like what keeps you up at night? What's your biggest problem? What do you want to solve? And when you do that enough, and this is the Mach49 process that Dave kind of opened my eyes to, but when you do that enough, you become confident in whatever, you know, you become confident that you truly understand not a problem, you can truly understand a problem. And you can speak with such confidence to those around you, the people you need to convince that, look, this is a problem we want to solve. And you've got such a deep, rich understanding of that problem through these, you know, hours and hundreds of interviews, that I think for me, that's when doubt started to become confidence. And yeah, so, hey, Jake and this Dado team, they understand a problem in a way that we as a company have never took the time to really understand. And we didn't say, is it a widget that you need or this or that? We truly said, what's a problem that we can solve as a starting point? And I think that authority, and Dave, you've probably seen it. I know you saw it with us once we finally started kind of synthesizing into a problem. You know, the confidence kind of becomes a snowball effect after that. You get this flywheel spinning of the next person you talk to, well, you know the problem. And now you've got confidence because you can start talking about solutions, and you truly can empathize with the person you're talking to, because you've talked to enough people like them. When they say something, you got it. Like you can feel it. You can feel their pain. You understand what they're talking about, and that becomes really satisfying individually, and I think for those around you to see that confidence start to transpire from those interviews and understanding the problem.
So that's really, I find that really fascinating. So the way I hear you say this is, phase one of the Mach49 process, or the passageway, was, you know, understanding the customer, not just as a source of problems, but also as a person, as you were implying.
Right.
So customer understanding. So I find it to be very fascinating that when you came into Mach49, going out to understand the customer was the source of confidence, and not spending time inside the organization.
Right.
So, you know, can you tell me just a little bit about that?
I think, you know, and I did spend time with a lot of customers prior, but it was always more along the context of, here's the solution. Does this solve your, you know, would you use this? Would this solve your problem? So we always, you know, we were, you know, as an innovative organization, you're coming up with ideas, then you go out and try to, you know, hey, would you buy this? Would you use it? Do you like this? Well, how would you want to do something different? And that was kind of always the context of talking to customers. So this was a completely different approach, and Dave had to beat all my ideas out of me for the first few weeks. Like, you know, I'd always say, Dave, we could do this, or we could solve this, or here's the idea. Here, this is the big idea. Like, no solutions, Jake. I only want to hear problems. So that was tough as a, you know, I've always done kind of innovative, you know, R&D stuff. So I always am like idea generating, and he really had to beat those out of me for a while until I had heard enough. I'd gone out and I'd really just asked, what's your problems? And what you realize, which is kind of a bit humbling, is your big ideas that you thought you were changing the world with, when you say, like, tell me the top 5 problems you have, if you're not solving like 1, 2, or 3, forget about it. And, you know, my ideas were solving like problem number 9 for these people. It wasn't a top problem that they had in their life. And that was humbling. It was a big change in the way I talked to, you know, at the time we wouldn't even call them customers, right? Like research in the past, I'm going to go do customer research. Well, we don't even know if these people are customers. You're just talking to people in the industry, like stakeholders is the path. And that was a huge change for me. And what I thought was user research, or, you know, and customer research, kind of flipping that on its head to really start with a blank slate, which was a ton of fun. I learned a lot from that. And
So let me turn to Dave here. Dave, what was the journey for you from the Mach49 end, helping the, Jake and the Dado team move from the room called anxiety or doubt to the room called confidence? Were there any moments in the customer discovery process that for you were ahas, both about Stanley Black & Decker as well as the customer?
Sure. Let me just highlight 3 moments that matter on our sort of journey of discovery together for Dado. Starting with the most recent, in running the Mach49 growth incubator, it's incredibly gratifying to see new ventures take methods and tools for customer discovery and bring them places that we never developed at Mach49. And for that reason, it's been wonderful to see Jake and his team build a process of customer sprints where months and years after working with Mach49, I just love the way they do this. They say to themselves, where do we need some outside input today, right? Jake recently found himself thinking about value-added services after the construction project is finished that could leverage but go significantly beyond the fundamental platform that he's providing for information gathering. And he said to himself, what do we need to know? He didn't commission market research. He didn't, kid himself that internally at Dado they could all come up with the best answers. He convened a customer advisory panel, and it's to his credit and to Dado's credit that he just snapped his fingers and got 5 high-profile clients in to help him through, frankly, all the way through into low-fidelity prototyping of what new services might look like. The reason that they're good at that at Dado is something they absorbed correctly is that the user interview process is just the beginning. User interviews and just gathering information and interviewing users based on, say, pain point interviews, that's flat unless it is accompanied by hypothesis creation and synthesis. That is, one needs to find meaning and find direction in all this conflicting and ambiguous information that you bring in. The second moment that mattered was when they brought all of that information together from hundreds and hundreds of interviews. I mean, they had Post-it notes just papering the walls and came away with a definitive view on segmentation, something startups do a notoriously poor job at, and that Dado did an absolutely outstanding job at. Who is our customer? Exactly what pain do they feel? Why do they matter? How can we approach it? And I guess the last point I want to make is all through this, I would build a little bit, Huggy, on your metaphor of a transition from doubt and anxiety to confidence. Sure, anxiety is the appraisal of an uncertain future, and an anxiety is a natural response to an uncertain future. But in the spirit of good science, okay, the best entrepreneurs keep a balanced point of view. They are neither wild-eyed and wildly enthusiastic about their vision, nor are they cynical, conservative, and inclined to sort of pull back at the least sign of problem. They take an open, clear-eyed view of problems they face while, consistent with uncertainty and doubt that you mentioned, Huggy, while at the same time retaining that sort of optimistic drive to solve those problems. It sounds simple, but it's very
hard to do.
And Jake, without false modesty, I think you can honestly say that you did a nice job of providing that balanced point of view between uncertainty and optimism.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I think, to your point, there's a vision, but you can't be so, the vision's going to change a little bit, or you're going to have a meander. So, and that's for an entrepreneur, for a, leader, you have to be so convicted on your vision, but also know that it's going to change a little. And that's tough because you got to be willing to have little pivots along the way, or even big pivots along the way, and still hold true to the vision. So when the vision becomes really solving a customer problem, not building this specific thing, then that becomes an easier path. But if you get too bought into like this one solution, this one piece of technology or hardware or software is going to change the world, you get you get pigeonholed, and you're not able to be agile and kind of adjust to reality. So
yeah, I love the way both Jake, both you and Dave described this journey of listening and understanding the customer. I think Dave very nicely identified outcomes, segmentation being one, and having real insight into the segmentation process. I'm curious, the first day when all of you met together, you with the incubation team and Dave with he and his Mach49 colleagues, can you just give me a flavor of what that first meeting was like? I mean, you're there, you've rolled your hands, your sleeves up, you're ready to get to work. What was that day like? Anything that stands out viscerally for either of you?
It's funny because, I've worked in the construction industry my whole life, one way or another. And I think the construction industry is fairly grounded in the sense of like traditional and here's how we do it, here's how we've always done it. And so I think what happens is you get this like stereotype vision of Silicon Valley and, this kind of crazy thinking and all this. And it seems like foreign, and what are these crazy tech people doing all the time? And my first experience there did not disappoint. It lived up to all what I expected stereotypes: crazy thinking, really smart people, Post-it notes, ideas generated and flying. And at first it was kind of like, yeah, what is, I'm a construction guy. Like, what is this? But once you understand why and how that, why that spurs innovation and why that spurs out, why that's important to have really good brainstorming sessions and really open, non-assuming types of conversations. And I experienced that on one of the first days when we did that sprint, Dave. And, one of those first days, all of a sudden it was like, oh, this, maybe it's a stereotype, but this is why we really allow ourselves to think freely, and we really, think big. And that like stuck in my mind. I remember that first day of the sprint and how I felt after that first day. It was really,
That's a wonderful memory, Jake. How about you, Dave? Any images of the first day of meeting with Jake and the Dado team?
It's an interesting thing, Jake. You spent time in China. I lived in Tokyo for a year back in the 80s. And the reason I bring that up is, notwithstanding what you said about it being hard to generalize about any sort of culture, it's incredibly valuable for an American to live in a country that is heavily built on tradition, on centuries and millennia of tradition, as opposed to being built on pioneering. And the reason I bring that up is the overwhelming sense I got was that in entering the construction industry, we were entering an industry built on tradition, not built on pioneering. One of my earliest clients, Skanska, the huge Scandinavian construction company, just matter-of-factly showed me charts of productivity improvements of fields like telecom and healthcare compared to productivity improvements in construction. And you can guess where this is going. Construction productivity improvement has been flat for 3 decades. It's really remarkable. So, all that to say, I think more than anything, I came away with an impression of a proud, relatively sort of hierarchical and apprentice-based industry that was justifiably proud of its traditions for good reasons and would not be easily changed.
That's fascinating. That's really fascinating. Let me move on to the next phase. After understanding the voice of the customer, segmenting, understanding the persons behind the problems, what was the second milestone, if you will? The second major chunk of activity? Was it prototyping? What was the second phase?
Yeah, there's kind of an interim phase where you do really lightweight prototyping is, I mean, at the simplest form, just hand sketches. Here's a potential product drawn on a piece of paper. Or here's a potential solution or potential idea. And the idea with those is really lots of ideas. Don't, you know, as many as you can, and then going back to some of those people who told you they had problems and say, like, here's 3 ideas or 4 ideas. Do any of these resonate with solving one of your big problems? And that was a lot of fun because, again, you got to, that was when I finally got to pull out all my great solutions that I knew were going to solve the world, and then realize that how many of them were just complete crap. But you know, that second phase allowed us to really, I mean, it gave me a chance to explore things that I thought were brilliant ideas and get feedback on them, but also learn how to double down on them. Oh, wait, this one actually has something. Now we need to kind of go pull on that thread a little bit. So that was I really enjoyed that. That was a ton of fun.
So it was pictures as prototypes, what you refer to as light prototypes.
Yep.
And the idea behind the prototypes was to have further interactions with the customer.
Correct. Yeah. I mean,
so that you could,
in order to come up with, you know, 10 products in a couple days, the best you could do is simple pictures. And turns out that's enough. I mean, as long as you build those correctly, that's, you know, you could have spent 3 weeks building a prototype on a phone or something, but it turns out you can just about get the same initial reaction from just drawing a picture. So that was kind of a way to move things quickly through ideation. And I think that was a brilliant way to solve that and actually run lots of ideas through a group of people. That worked very well.
It's almost as though the light prototyping was a sieve through which ideas kind of got strained and kind of filtered. So Dave, earlier you had described the industry as one of tradition, and by which I would assume that before you came to the market with the product, it was all designed, put together, etc. What was it like using low resolution prototyping and this type of interaction with the customer in the context of a large organization, in a traditional organization, as you point out, and in a traditional industry?
Light prototyping was a real relief because we started to see our way clear to some solutions. Think of it this way. For the first 3 or 4 weeks, the Dado team did completely open-ended research, what we often call pain point research, okay? They were asking the most open-ended questions possible, like what are the biggest problems you face in the course of a day, to construction workers and architects and building owners and you know, and foremen and so on. And sure, we got a lot of answers, but we had such a huge set of stakeholders and such an extraordinary list of pain points that we needed to move in to what we like to call stimulus-based research, where I have one of the low fidelity ideas that Jake described a little earlier, such as a storyboard, a simple 4-panel description that illustrates a solution and what it means at very low fidelity. Stimulus-based research means I'm not just going to do a completely agnostic form of question asking. I'm going to poke you with some specific stimulus and see what comes back. And it was there that we were really able to hone in on what pains were the most acute and the most severe, you know. And we had the absolute luxury that there were many terribly acute pain points. I'll never forget, Jay, when sitting in an interview with your team, when I learned in interview after interview after interview that fundamental to the planning process, people were literally breaking the laws of physics. The planners had 2 different people in the same place at the same time. Fire control, the individuals were installing the sprinkler systems, and plumbers from completely separate unions, separate organizations, and they both needed to be in exactly the same place at the same time. There's a really acute problem, begging.
I remember at one point, Dave, because, we were not the first people to go through the Mach49 process. And I remember at one point, Dave and I were sitting around at the end of a long day, and he's like, Jake, in other teams we've worked with, we really have to work to find a problem. I think with you guys, with the Dado team, we have to really work to pick which of the 20 problems we want to solve, because they're all great.
Exactly.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. So light prototyping led to problem prioritization. And I
Yes.
love the example that you gave, Dave. What was the next milestone in the Mach49 process that was the passageway between these rooms of doubt and confidence?
From that light prototyping, you begin to really get a feel for, number one, in our case, which problem we wanted to solve, because we did have more than one that we were hypothesizing on, and then what a solution would look like. So the next phase was actually building I think we called it a medium fidelity. So this was some clickable, we were looking for software solutions. So something that you could interact with. And those we didn't do as many, because we had, the previous phase gave us a clue on here's the problem, or one or two we wanted to solve. And then we started building low resolution or medium resolution prototypes, meaning you could put it on an iPad or something and click around. And that, that allowed you to really start to understand, you could really get a user's impact on, oh, wow, like if I could use this, or if it only did this, or, hey, this is never going to work because here's two problems I didn't think of last time you talked to me. And now that you've built a prototype, I can see that it's a bad idea. And so also extremely useful feedback. So at that point, you're getting pretty close to, what a product, you start getting towards productization and what you might actually do to solve the problem. And that, again, the confidence, the excitement starts building, because you get the feedback that, number one, these guys really understand the problem, which is great, by, on those solutions. And then, you start actually building very, rudimentary, but you start building something that you can actually get the feeling and excitement, you connect with the user, and they're like, whoa, this is it. This is what I need. And that's a pretty exciting phase when you do hit it right.
Dave, any observations on this phase from your end? Anything that stands out for you?
In terms of the prototyping phase, where we were getting actual input, something that all of us have seen in large companies that Dado managed to avoid is clashes between senior leadership with strong opinions, development teams, right? There was an individual in leadership at Stanley Black & Decker who felt, for various reasons, that a physical communication tool to allow on-site workers of all types to communicate better from person to person in a peer-to-peer fashion was the way we should go, okay? Our research, and in particular the prototype, demonstrated the viability of a very different direction from that, right? An information gathering tool for complex building information databases. Now, what you generally see in that kind of situation is the manager says it's A and the development team says it's B, and they just go at it. We've all seen that so many times, okay? Yep. You've got prototypes, you've got hundreds of interviews. All of a sudden, these two people that would normally go at it, right? Because they both have these strong, heartfelt opinions about where to go. They're both outwardly faced looking at the customers, right. Okay? Their commitment is no longer to bang heads with each other. It's to make customers happy and to understand customer pain points. And so it is the response of dozens and dozens of users to our, as I recall, our medium fidelity prototype that really aligned the Stanley Black & Decker leadership in a way that there's no way you would have gotten with some stupid PowerPoint deck and a bunch of bullet points. No way.
Yeah. So this is interesting. So listening to the voice of the customer united both the senior leadership as well as the development team. So there's another angle I want to get at for our users. Normally, when one thinks of large organizations, we think of a particular clock speed at which things are done. What was the clock speed when you were working with, the Dado team, Jake and Dave? And how did that contrast with the clock speed of the rest of the organization? I'm curious as to what observations you have on clock speed. Was that a big shock to some of your colleagues from Stanley Black & Decker, Jake?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was a breath of fresh air, because I mean, it was like unfettered, go run. And I loved that environment, there was no justifying what we're doing. None of these like have to build a internal PowerPoint deck to go explain why I need to go do a user research trip. So I think for me, it was just I felt at home. It was great, and we worked hard and we worked fast for that period. I think the Stanley Black & Decker team, the ones that were kind of overseeing some of this, were just blown away. You talk to 40 people in this, in these 2 days. Yeah, we did 40 interviews on this prototype, and user research in inside the company, maybe you get 1 or 2 done in a week or something like that, 1 or 2 interviews. So I think the speed at which not only we were able to connect with the industry, but also to iterate and come up with ideas was just dizzying. I can't remember who it was, Dave, but one of the Stanley Black & Decker folks, it was something like, a day in Dado time was like a month of Stanley Black & Decker.
Oh, beautiful.
It was that order of magnitude of
Yeah.
which is pretty cool.
That's sort of beautiful. So Dave, from your perspective as, the Mach49 instigator, facilitator, all of this on the team, what was it helping a team in a high velocity environment? I mean, they're going at that kind of speed.
The team had a lot of energy. And so the biggest problem that we have on occasion run into, which is energizing a reluctant team, didn't happen at all. The biggest problem we had was just one of logistics. Jake will remember, we would, the team would conduct so many interviews, they went to they went to the construction site where the Warriors Stadium was being built. And I don't even know how many people you talked to right then. Every interview needs to be debriefed. Every interview needs to be recorded on our database, interpreted, synthesized, right? And I mean, I'll just never forget, just night after night after night, there were 2 guys on his team, Greg, who's a scrawny guy like me, and a guy named Zach that's built like Schwarzenegger. It was like the Roman numeral 4, like IV standing next to each other, These guys just every evening staring at a ridiculous number of Post-it notes and digital photos and things like that from the day, trying to make sense and trying to make meaning. That's how people really achieve disruptive innovation. Is you wake up in the morning, you work all day into the evening on a single program with a single goal in mind. You go home, you go to bed, next day, you're at it again.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful memory that you summon, Dave. I want to shift emphasis a little bit. The impression I get is, listening to the both of you, you have the Dado team and you're doing all of this sort of work at high velocity, talking to customers, light prototyping, medium fidelity prototyping. What about mothership management? Dave, you hinted when you said that senior leadership at Stanley Black & Decker and the development team were aligned because of the voice of the customer. But were there other aspects of mothership management that stand out for both of you that eventually led to the spin-off, if you will?
Something that I think of the many things that the Dado team did well, one of them is what we like to call day in the life, and it was a process that was in earlier stages when Dado was building its new venture, which is what you don't want to do. Sort of expressed in the negative is the typical boring client consultant report out, where Jake and team might get together with a leadership group at Stanley Black & Decker for 90 minutes every week or every other week.
Right.
This week, what are you thinking? What are you going to do next week? Okay, that's just table stakes. What you really need is to involve people actively in what we like to call shared generative activities. Bring them to an interview. Have them help you with a prototype. Give them a seat at the synthesis table. Okay, have them help you interpret some of these interviews they've done. And Jake can help me out, but to my memory, Kevin Lemke and all the other members of the new venture board, all of them, I believe, played shared generative roles and actually helped push our content work forward. And for that reason, they had a real sort of visceral appreciation of what was going on and a stake in the program's success that you just never get with some dull weekly report out.
Yeah, I think
Yeah. Go ahead, Jake.
critical to the process. If you remember, Tony Nicolaitis was both in person and on the digital presence, and I think by having like him like do an interview, it just, I think they begin to, again, it's that path to confidence and understanding that the rigor and the pace that we're working and the way we work, getting them engaged in it versus giving them a report out, all of a sudden gave confidence to the leadership team that I don't think we would have gotten if we just did a weekly update summary. And I think it gave us cover too, that we were actually ideating and coming up with ideas. And they might have ideas too, but if you have them, come and put them into the process and work with us on it. Don't just say, oh, you guys should do this instead, which is, we talked about that earlier. That's the senior leadership versus product team, that you just get into a who's got authority and then you're stuck. Well, if you get an idea, we'll build a prototype, we'll show it to some customers and see what they say. And then all of a sudden they begin to realize how effective our process is.
Yeah, I really love this example that both of you generated. And the way I heard both of you describe it, Jake and Dave, is, hey, in the traditional report out update format, top management is informed, but where are the insights is one question. The second sort of question is, if you adhere to the update and inform mode, you make top management into a judge. But what I heard from both of you is, wait a minute, we don't want to give them information, we want them to acquire insight by getting out of their office and talk to customers. And once you have customer understanding, you kind of realize that, look, you're in problem solving mode, not in judge mode. Is that a reasonable way to parse what was the process like?
Beautiful. Switch them over from judges to problem solvers. That's beautiful. Right. Jake?
Yep, I couldn't agree more. Yep, that's exactly
Wonderful.
The strategy.
So I'm curious, I want to bring it back to your personal life, Jake. Here you are, energy, you're type 7, you're giving this everything you have. So I'm curious, what about at home? How did your partner describe your evolution? How did your children see you change? I'm curious. Do you have any reflections, or was this all at work and it had no effect on your personal life at all?
No, certainly has had an effect. So, I mean, the general sense of running hard, chasing a vision, pushing hard, that's just been me my whole life. My wife knows what she got into. I'm very passionate and enthusiastic about my work, and it's one of those things. I just love to do it. I'm not looking for more time off. I love the work. So that part I think we're bought into, and that obviously starting a company, you got to have a bit of that. I think the piece of listening though is definitely something she noticed, and not again, not coming with the solution, but understanding the problem. And there's an art to that, and we were coached well through Mach49, and Dave and team had, we read a lot of good books about how to listen, and that's not unique. I mean, those are skills that don't just apply to business. Those turns out listening at home has some benefits too. Little did I know going in, but I think the ability to really stop and listen, especially for somebody like me who maybe talks more than their fair share sometimes in a relationship, I think the ability to first stop and listen to the problem was a good one. And she, if you talk to her, she would have said the same thing, like she noticed it.
Beautiful. I love that. I love that your listening at home has improved. What about you, Dave? I imagine each engagement for you is different. Each engagement gives you perhaps a different insight, or might be reinforce other insights. How did that change? How did this change you as a person?
Sure. I mean, I would say, generally, Huggy, in terms of work, we should all feel very lucky if we are lucky enough to consider our jobs as opportunities for personal and professional growth. You're lucky, I'm lucky, Jake's lucky, everyone at Dado is lucky, right? So just look, know you're lucky if you can blithely say to yourself, I took this job because it helps me grow more as a person, and it also helps me with improve my professional qualifications. So in general, something I love about being part of incubations is that, 3 days is too short, but 12 weeks is enough to really dig into a topic. And what happens is these areas become really, really interesting once you start to dig into the detail.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, looking at patterns in my life, whether those patterns are personality characteristics of successful leaders or attributes of emerging technologies that take wing and really take off and lead to success and enable successful new ventures. What I really value is the pattern matching and pattern finding that I'm able to do from incubation to incubation to incubation.
Wonderful.
And
Wonderful.
By the way, Dave's pattern matching was something we all thrived on during
and admired.
And afterwards. The same reason we keep bringing him back to work with us, because that ability, the experience that he's been able to bring, look, I don't know a lot about construction, guys, but here's a way we might have solved this in another industry. His ability to do that was something we've just all thrived on, and why we love working with Dave even today.
Wonderful. So we've covered a fair bit of ground, and I was just wanting to, before we close, I wanted to ask you both the same question. Was there a question I should have asked that I didn't ask?
That's a very Mach49 question there, Huggy.
I think, Huggy, one thing you might have asked Jake is, what made your group, what made the Dado team such a winning team?
Brilliant. There you have it. How do you get a group of people and glue them into a winning team? What does a winning team mean, really?
Yeah, it isn't the team. It's a good question. It isn't the team that's individually the best performers or the best rock stars or the tops of the field. It's actually the team that figures out how to work well together and can, where you get 1 + 1 = 3 out of your team, and that's you don't get that for free. There's a part of number one of bringing the right people in, but even when they're there, you have to figure out how to make that team, optimize that team for who's on the team. And that's why for me personally, I take things like personality and we spend a lot of time, everybody who joins Dado goes through the Enneagram. We talk to each other about, here's what type of person I am, here's things I'm working on, here's how to best work with me. And I think you need to be very explicit about what it means to collaborate and what it means to work. And just because you were great in another company or another role doesn't mean that you're going to be the right person for the Dado team. And I think I view that very much as my job, and I take it very much responsibility to make sure we get that right culture built. And that is a major challenge. I think why we're doing well today, Dave, is that we're very explicit about that, and we put effort into it. We don't just assume that somebody's going to be a good fit for the team, and even after we hire them, we don't assume that it's they're going to start doing what we need, gelling and everything. We have to put a lot of work into that, and to be honest, it's exponentially harder today in a fully remote environment if that's not how you were originally set up.
Right.
So, so it's been a great. That's part of the. If you love that like I do, that's part of the job. But that is a good question. I think you were a little light on me too, Huggy. There's always questions about what would you have done different. What was the?
Yeah, I was going to ask you that.
And worst part, but I think what I would have done different, I think would have been. I've said this to Dave too, but I think spending even more time on personalities and some of that teamwork from day one. We kind of stumbled into that as we progressed. I think starting off with just much more teamwork, and not jumping into the work quite as well. And I know Dave and I have talked about that as well. I mean, I think there's a lot to learn there. And a very important part of building a team. And like I said, just because you got 5, 6 people that are really good at what they do doesn't mean those are the right 5 or 6 people to work together.
Right. Any
Guys?
reflections on winning the team? And as Jake mentioned, anything you wish you would have done differently, Dave?
You know, I think Jake's point about personality is well taken. I have to say it's a small point, but you know, the trips that you took to actual construction sites were so productive, particularly for people that have not spent much time on construction sites and didn't necessarily know the personalities. I think one thing I would have done more is immersion from the very beginning. We knew what we knew now, Jake, and we wanted to get that team up to speed just as quickly as possible. We would have hit the road on week 1 and figured out in sort of the greater Bay Area, you know, even out to Stockton, Manteca, whatever, how to talk to a big swath of stakeholders right on site. Because there was nothing like those on-site interviews to really bring home the rich insights, in my observation. Should have done more of that.
Yeah, it's a good one. We've had that challenge even hiring people, you know, post leaving Mach49 is, you know, if you're building a dog food app or a car or something or banking, like most people you can hire a designer who can say, oh, I understand what it means to have a dog food app or deal with my bank. But it's hard to find people that can understand what a foreman's job is like and what it means to have a submittal rejected, and that, you know, it's not a consumer product, we'll put it that way. And the faster you can immerse people in what it means to be in the construction industry, I think that's a very good point.
And look, I grew up in Los Angeles. I live in the Bay Area. I've walked by, driven by, bicycled by all kinds of construction projects my whole life. You know, I made some money when I was a teenager doing some work on a residential construction site, but I never would have intuited, you know, all the difficult interplay, say, between the designers and the engineering team and the tradesmen and the foremen and stuff. I never would have imagined the problems that we came to grips with, and so much of that had to do with the sort of, you know, immediate in-your-face exposure that the team got.
Well, like I said, even me, having been in the industry for so long, I learned so much through that process too. And I thought I knew everything about construction when we started. And even, you know, the discipline of really mapping out the stakeholders, really talking to enough people at each trade, you realize that, you know, you might solve a problem for this person, but you created 2 more for somebody else. And if that's what you did, that's a bad solution. And you don't necessarily get that unless you take the time to kind of map out the stakeholders.
You know, this has been really a true joy and a pleasure for me listening to the both of you, because what I'm walking away with is, as I sort of listen to you, you know, what sort of stood out for me is how often in large companies, a big problem of innovation and a big problem of creating the soul of the startup is what can be referred to as innovation blindness. Or more generally, change blindness. And what I mean by that is you've got your idea of the product even before you've talked to the customer, and the product is something you want to do to a customer.
Right.
And, you know, and for me, what you both of you in this conversation were able to show is how the Mach49 passageway between the room called doubt and the room called confidence is actually a way that where it reduces blindness. And therefore, once you reduce blindness, you don't need to sell because, hey, you're helping. If you're helping, they need it. And I just love the way in which you took me through that journey. And so thank you both very much.
That was a pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Huggy. And
My
Dave,
pleasure.
always a pleasure.
Thank you, Dave.
Bet.